That was the lovely anthem from Leonard Cohen, and as you can tell by all that clapping and a cheering, it's live in London from 2009. Ian, as the man who's chosen the tracks for today, can you explain why anthem was an important choice?
Oh, Jackie, there's a crack in everything, and that's really how life is. And it's only through the cracks, as I was saying before, perhaps the mistakes that we make, that we get the insight that we really need. And we learn about ourselves and we learn about the world.
There's a great saying in the work, in part of a lot of the personal development work that I've done, that talks about the errors we observe in others are more often than not the ones we can't see in ourselves.
I'd agree with that entirely. In fact, I think others reflect where our weaknesses lie.
Thank you. That was another lovely choice. And Leonard Cohen never goes astray on the program. You're invited to join But I Feel Good's Facebook page by searching for Radio Show But I Feel Good, and joining the Facebook page is how you can let me know what you're thinking about the show. Let me know any topics you'd like to hear about. You can hear about upcoming programs, and you also get the opportunity to ask guests like the lovely Ian and Stephen today questions that you might have, and you also get to have some marvellous mind health moments in your day. You're listening to But I Feel Good because your mind health matters. Every year, Lifeline receives over 1 million contacts from help seekers, and you can call Lifeline 24 hours a day on 13 11 14, and in the case of emergency, please call 000. Let's get back to the guys who wrote Me to We. Let's talk about what it is that you have achieved together already. And I reckon, Ian, this one's for you.
Thanks, Jackie. Look, before we started this change management business in our construction company, CGA Bryson, we thought we already had a very collaborative business. We thought we were doing very well. We'd built our success around good relationships. We had 2 or 3 contractors working for us from each trade, and they were treated very well. But we did tender the work, which is common in the industry. And I had in the back of my mind, though, that we were heading into a bull market in construction, that everyone would get busy, and that we wanted our contractors to be responsive to our needs. We also were growing as a business, and with that growth we felt that we might get noticed by the unions, and we wanted to have some level of protection in good relationships with contractors that we were using. So we started out this project with a $25 million building, and what we did, we got together 7 or 8 of our major contractors. They would have represented perhaps around 80% of the building costs. We got them together and we said, look, we've just got a town planning permit, but you guys have got the job. There'll be no tenders, and down the track we'll negotiate a price, and we expect that you will be able to give us the right price.
How unusual is that in the building industry?
I suspect it's never been heard of before, Jackie.
I suspect you might be right, Ian. Just thought we'd talk about that.
There was a lot of I don't know how to say that.
Incredulity?
Yeah, incredulity around the room. We had a workshop with our contractors, and when we invited them into this program, and a lot of them just didn't believe it. They were just not used to this. They're used to being having their work tendered and then being beaten up, getting the price reduced, and then all along the line being yelled at for not turning up on time, for their prices being too high, and so on.
And just from a consulting perspective, we call this the master-servant model, which most organisations work in, whereby people lower down get told what to do, and they never get asked what we should do. And this was the huge change in Ian's project, that for not tendering, they were asked to come into the design phase with architects and engineers, and never before had they met or talked to each other, even though the people building had to build from a plan that an architect produced, and every single time they got there had to change it. We were saying, let's do that once, right up front. Let's get all the intellectual property of the contractors, who now knew they had the work because they didn't have to tender, so they provided all their intellectual property at the beginning, and it made the building process incredibly easy, fast, much cheaper than it had been, and everyone felt great, and they were part of one team for the first time ever.
Thanks, Stephen. That master-servant relationship you talked about is something that I've certainly seen over the last 15 years of executive and corporate coaching. It is prevalent, not only in the building industry, but is prevalent from the CEO down. And
it's hard for people in those roles to see an alternative to the master servant. And I think so when you did your introduction, at 26-year-old, I found myself in that combative adversarial environment, and I thought, this is a crazy way to live a life. You can't survive in this life working like that every day. So that's what Ian... it was probably one of the great questions I've ever been asked by a client, which was, go and build me a collaborative system. And it wasn't driven by money. It was driven by relationships. And what I saw there was it was driven by soulful connections with human beings.
Stephen, I find that the management style or in the building and construction industry was what I would call management by walking around and screaming the loudest. And the technique is that you push and push and push until the contractor delivers what they said they would. You don't actually talk to them. And any wonder that we have such problems with domestic violence and things like that, when if people have been yelled and screamed at all day for doing their job and then they go home, how do you think they must feel? It's incredible.
And I think that was a revelation for me, because Ian had this very deep held belief that people could learn as much at work as they can in life. And so our challenge as consultants was to build this life where work was the same as life and going home. So if we did our work well, people would go home with smiles on their faces, and it wasn't a surprise that they still had that smile on their face when they walked in to see their children or partner, and life was better at home because of what we created at work.
And I would imagine that coming back to work the next morning, that smile would still be on their dial.
Yeah, and we had lots of examples. We used to do monthly training sessions, and at the end of one of these sessions I wandered out and I saw one of the key people he was an electrical supervisor, and he was part of our steering group, which was a cross-company group that Ian led, and we facilitated, and he was calling, and I said to him, who are you chatting to? And he said, I have to call my wife every time we have a session, Stephen, because I take what you give us home and we work on it in our relationship. So we had this wonderful picture where they were using us as their marriage development process. And we had another fellow who changed the way he coached his soccer side. And we had, many, many examples where people were so excited about what we were doing. But having said that, Ian mentioned some of them didn't believe it was possible. And it's true to say that we also didn't know it was possible. So Ian said, well, what will stop them from screwing us? Which is the term that if we don't tender, why will they not overcharge? And we didn't know the answer, but we believed that if we created soulful workplaces and we looked after people, they would look after Ian. And the proof was in the pudding when we actually had, I think, Napier and Blakely, Ian, wasn't it, who came to assess the contracts. And lo and behold, everyone had reduced their prices, but Ian had never asked them to reduce their price. And so this confounded us, and it proved that actually we want to work better than the way we currently do.
I'm getting goosebumps. The interesting thing for me is this notion of doing what I'm going to call the right thing, and I often tend to stay away from right and wrong because it's just a perception we all have. If people think you are doing the right thing by them, it doesn't surprise me at all that without even being asked, they probably, didn't even have a conscious recognition at first about how much they were being given, but they knew that there was a quid pro quo and they would give something back without necessarily knowing it. And that scepticism you talk about, I still remember in the fire services going in to talk to a group of senior officers, and one of them sat there through the whole meeting with his arms crossed up his chest as tight as he could, and you could just see how totally skeptical he was. And he even talked about his bull dust beacon going off on his head the moment I walked in the door, because I called it. I sort of said to him, "Oh, so sir, you're looking a bit skeptical." And he, of all the people who went through that program, made the biggest shifts and changes, and it was because they realised there's someone here for them. They take it home, they take it into their work life, and they appreciate the people who gave them the opportunity to do things differently. So it doesn't surprise me at all that happened. So talk to me now about the book and how that came about, and maybe some more examples from the book, if there are some more that you'd like to talk about.
For me, I had never been involved in a project where I did so little and yet achieved so much. So for me, this was a mystery. I'm a career consultant, and so at a very deep level, I did believe that people want to do the right thing. So there was research in the 50s by McGregor about X person and Y person. X person is that person who wants to do their best. They just don't get too many systems whereby they can. And Deming, the great quality guru, he made a comment that there are many, many bad systems and there are a few bad people. So we worked with that construct that our job was to create a great system that people could be human on a day-to-day basis and deliver their best. And we believed that that would deliver the best for the organisation, both Ian's, but more importantly for each of the suppliers and contractors, because they were more profitable, but they reduced their prices because it took less time to build than ever before. So, of course, they loved the system, but they also gave an enormous amount back. And it's why we call the book From Me to We, because it went from changing people's perspectives about I need to look after me to I need to look after the we. And that is me, who I report to, which is the client, but also the contractors who I work with, because we built this picture of interdependence where everybody could see the consequences of their actions on each other, and that created a system that we as consultants could not keep up with. This concept of change management that Ian mentioned, it didn't exist in this project because they wanted this more than Ian imagined and I imagined. So our work was keeping up with their intent of working collaboratively because they knew deep in their bones that it was the right thing to do.
It's very interesting, Jackie, that a lot of these people, they were really hanging out for this sort of approach that's so uncommon in the building industry, even though a lot of builders would say they work well and closely with their contractors. I remember one incident where I think it was on our first project actually. We hadn't programmed it that well, and what happened was that we got the precast panels up on the project a month ahead of schedule.
Yep.
And as a result, the structural steel wasn't due to arrive for a month. And there was a hiatus in the program. So the structural steel contractor came to us and said, I've just got rid of all my other clients and I'm putting your project in because I don't want to let the team down. It was nothing about me. She was now involved in the team. And that's what we did. We changed things from a hierarchical, top-down approach to one where each of the contractors was in a single layer, a single level. And they all had their own skills. And what we did, we had a bit of a problem with our staff. I went to site one day and I said to one of our project managers, I said, how are you coping with collaboration? How's it going for you? And he turned to me rather with tongue-in-cheek and said, when do we get to whack them? And there wasn't any whacking. His role had changed completely from top down to where he had to actually hold these people and look after them.
It's an interesting idea when I think about a particular television show which will remain nameless that gives the impression that it's in the building industry. It gives the impression that it's push, 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 push. And yet when somebody looks like they're going to crumble, they come in and because there's the drama required for the television. So it'd be so lovely to work in any place, whether it's a building site or, a service industry or IT or manufacturing or whatever it is, to be able to know that you're going into work every day and whether it's tongue-in-cheek, truth in jest, when are we going to whack them, that's not even on the plate. It's not in the playing field, it's not in the lane. It's
Yes, this whole
Too
project.
excited, Ian.
Yeah, that's right. This whole project for me was what I call about seeing the other person that's opposite you as a real human being. And I think too often people get reduced to numbers in the HR department, and that's what's really wrong with the world of business today. And I think we need to start looking at people as human beings who are all valuable, who are all creative, and they can do great work if only they're given the opportunity.
And it's really interesting that you singled out the HR department as the one that makes the people a number, because my experience is that it's the CEO who's looking to make the biggest profit from his shares, and the directors who are trying to save their job because they've built the lifestyle that they're accustomed to and they can't afford to lose their jobs. Dr. Robert Cialdini has done some amazing work on bankers in this sort of design, in this context. And then it's the pressure that the finance department get under that then go, okay, so what do you want for a budget? What do you want for a budget? What do you want for a budget? Okay, we're going to halve all of that.
Yeah, very sad, really.
It's a tragic state of affairs, and I have worked in a lot of organisations over the last 15 years with a lot of organisations, and you just see it time and time again.
Well, what we did, Jackie, was we said to people, we want you to do your best, we want you to trust us, and we will trust you to deliver the project. And I remember having a conversation with our plumber on one occasion, and he said to me, you know, we're putting 10% less resources onto your projects now. And you know what? We're making more money on your projects than we are on our tender work. So we'd cut out a huge amount of waste. Everyone was working together. They would borrow tools, equipment from each other. It's unheard of. It was just an amazing process, and these people were absolutely ready for it. As Stephen said, he didn't have to do very much of his consulting work to get such an amazing result. But I think that it came about to a large extent because of the attitude that we started out with.
I'm assuming that whole story and that model and strategy and philosophy has been put into me to we. And when I think about the most toxic workplace in Australia, it has to be the federal parliament.
Yep.
And if we could get them to have a chat with you and go me to we, can you imagine what our country would be like if on a political level we operated from me to we?
And they do say that they do work like that when the TV's not on in the parliamentary committees, but I do wonder how people could switch from that adversarial, hate-based model to a collaborative one, but I do hope it's real. Well, I'd just like to go back to something Ian mentioned that I still remember, it still resonates deep inside me, that this woman who ran this steel fabrication company, she said very early on that she expects to get insulted every day on site. And it really had an impact on me that is normal in any workplace. And there's been a hell of a lot of work done in this context about workplace culture and how productivity, and if you look after people, they'll look after you. But this project, I think, was so successful because all those people had come from that background where it was hostile and no one ever listened to anybody else if they weren't at the same level. We created this workplace and we used a picture of trust, care and courage, and those three things worked together in what we designed, and that was against the normal organisational picture that nurtures a concept of fear, doubt and hatred amongst people. And so we matched those three with this trust, care and courage and created this, what I call an upward spiral of activity. And really our job was to look after the space so everyone was being respectful. We had one promise in the project in terms of values and behaviours, and that was that you will do what you say. And we said, if you make a promise and you can't keep it, you are responsible to renegotiate that promise with the person you made it. And because people did what they said and kept their promise, that created more and more trust. And where more trust is, then people then care for each other and the promises they've made. And then as they get to know each other, there's this courage that steps up about naming things that have never been said.
Thanks, Stephen. After this break, we're going to talk to Ian and Stephen about what they're looking forward to achieving in the future. Right now, he ain't heavy, he's my brother.
the road